I received a comment about how buyers can cut their agent out of a transaction due to the new Assembly Bill 2992 going into effect in California, which requires buyers' agents to have a representation agreement with their buyer clients, which is similar to the realtor regulation in every state. If you're a realtor, you're required to have a representation agreement with your buyer. But this comment states specifically that the California Department of Real Estate has indicated that buyers can simply walk away or cut the agent out and proceed with the listing agent. And I'll show you the exact advisory. I'll start with the comment. It's very good. This is what inspired this video. She writes, have you done a video yet about the new California Department of Real Estate regulation? If out-of-pocket costs to pay their agent remain too great and the seller and buyer haven't yet come to an agreement, the buyer can walk away from the subject property, proceed without representation, or approach the seller's agent about possible dual representation. So basically, the buyer can go unrepresented and proceed without you, the buyer's agent. They just cut you out. Or they can go to the listing agent and say, hey, my buyer's agent's too expensive. How about I just have you represent me? And the listing agent becomes a dual agent. And she goes on to say, it seems pretty crazy that they're requiring, the state is requiring, the state now requiring the buyer representation agreement, but then also saying it's not enforceable if the buyer can't afford to pay their agent. This is such a great comment. And here we are looking at the California Department of Real Estate licensee advisory. They send this out to licensees. Now, again, California issue at the forefront, but this is really a nationwide issue for any realtor because realtors are required already to have a representation agreement. This just now you have state law in California mirroring the realtor rule that realtors must have that representation agreement. Why? Well, the California Association of Realtors co-sponsored this bill. I mean, this bill was written by the Realtor Special Interest Group along with Zillow. I mean, it's not like the politician that drafted this was sitting around thinking about what's wrong with real estate agency. Gosh, I better do this one thing that totally mirrors the NAR settlement. No, this is absolutely clearly, I mean, they proudly represent that they sponsored the California Association of Realtors. Anyway, now that the DRE, the state is involved, of course, they're going to apply consumer protections likely to an excessive degree because that's a pattern in California, excessive levels of consumer protection when it comes to real estate. Ask any landlord. But here it says, if the out-of-pocket costs to pay their agent remain too great, meaning the buyer, and the seller and buyer have not yet reached an agreement on the sales price, the buyer may walk away from the subject property, provided there's an exit clause, proceed without representation, or approach the seller's agent about possible dual agency. All right, so this is obscene in my opinion, because like the commenter said, they're requiring that agents use a buyer representation agreement, but they're also saying that the requirements, the stipulations of the agreement don't apply to the buyer client, only the agent. So the agent can be held liable, but the buyer can just cut the agent out at any time. If it says if the out-of-pocket costs to pay their agent remain too great. Okay, so this whole thing is predicated on this if, right? I mean, there's this other stuff like they haven't reached the agreement, but if the costs remain too great, that to me is what should be focused on in order to prevent an agent from being cut out of a deal. This should never happen, by the way. I'm telling you now in this video that an agent should never get cut out of a transaction. Let me jump over to a buyer representation agreement, okay? This is just a sample of the BRBC. Okay, now the good thing about this form is that this does have some protections in place. Namely, now again, I have said in my video before, my tutorial how to fill this out, you should go into an exclusive agreement. If you don't like something about the exclusive agreement, well, add on some other verbiage in here. Like maybe you want the cancellation to not take 30 days after receipt in the exclusive. Okay, change it, but you should always do exclusive. But if you want to know why, go watch my other video. I won't bore you with my explanation, but I personally think you should always be exclusive. Now, what you need to do is if there's agent involvement, always give a list of any home in which there's agent involvement. Or what they say, broker involvement here, where you did any of these things. Why? Because even if the buyer cancels, they owe you the compensation. Okay, but here's the problem. And I've been asked this in my other tutorial videos about this ridiculous, absurd, nonsensical line here. Buyer does not have sufficient funds to pay a broker. Okay, if you are filling this form out and you check this box, stop what you're doing. Do not proceed. Do not proceed with this agreement. Do not proceed with that client. And you should even question proceeding with your career as a real estate agent, because why on earth are you giving services to someone that not only is supposed to have sufficient funds to pay for an asset in California is basically $1 million. I mean, that's it. I mean, a home is $1 million in California. That's just the breaks. Yes, there's cheaper and there's more expensive, but generally speaking, if you're selling a home, it's going to be around that price. Okay, if they don't have sufficient funds to pay you, how can they afford to buy the home? Why are you offering services to someone that can't pay the broker? This line makes no sense. If you check this box, you are doing free work. I would say you're doing a nonprofit, but that doesn't even make sense because even nonprofits work off donations. You're getting nothing. You're getting zero. And it's not even charitable. You don't even get a deduction for it. You must put compensation up here. Now, if your buyer has indicated that they have liquidity challenges, okay, which is different with the sufficient funds. Sufficient funds means there's no funds available anywhere, not even in a retirement account, not even in equity in their current home. There are not sufficient funds. This is nonsense. Never, ever, ever check this box. Never proceed with a buyer that's claiming to have insufficient funds. You go up here to amount of compensation. Two things. One, you should always ask for proof of funds from your buyer. Why? The seller's going to ask for it. It's in the contract. You're required to deliver it at some point. Why would you not ask for proof of funds up front? They're engaging you to work for free. Agents, listen to me. Stop working for free, okay? We work on spec and real estate. I've been licensed since 2002, and I'm telling you, I've seen every side of this. I've seen agents do very well. I've seen agents that have struggled time after time again and have been exploited by their clients. And I'm telling you right now that if we work on spec, and if we're to work on spec, we must set boundaries in place so that we don't continually miss out on ever getting a payday, because that can happen. You can take the wrong client and show homes for 18 months to multiple clients and not one of them buys or not one offer gets accepted, and you've worked for free for 18 months. I'm explaining how to avoid that. So in amount of compensation, you put a number. If the buyer has liquidity challenges, get creative. Check this box. Here's a question. How could a buyer not have enough money to buy how could a buyer not have enough money to pay you a commission but buy $1 million home? Okay, maybe all the cash. Here's the answer. All the cash that they need has been allocated toward the purchase, the down payment, the funds needed to close, and there's not a single penny left over to pay you, but there's just enough to get that perfect dream home they've always wanted. Okay, fine. Is that the last money they'll make their entire life? No. Okay, check this box and write out that they're going to make monthly payments to you. Create a note. Go into ChatGPT and say, I'm a real estate agent. My buyer's paying me over 24 months. Here's the commission amount. Write out a note. There, you have a note done for you, drafted for free. Do you see what I'm saying? There should never, ever be a scenario in which you are not paid. Do not take this. Do not discount this. This number should be as high as possible. And you can tell your buyer that should there be a difference, should the seller not be able to compensate you for the 3% that you put here, you can always discount a portion of it, but certainly not all of it. I mean, there must be a base. And this number here should never be beneath that base. If your base is 2% to sell a property, hey, some agents out there, maybe their base is 1%. Fine, put 1%, but never, ever, ever go below that baseline in this commission agreement. So here's the takeaway. I'm going to wrap it up because I could just rant about this ad infinitum. So I'll just say this as just in conclusion. Ask for a proof of funds if you have any doubt. You should be asking for proof of funds anyway, just for the simple fact that you're going to have to present it to the seller when you write an offer. Number two, if the buyer has liquidity issues and is anyhow or any way alluding to this section here, or complaining about liquidity issues, you need to offer in accordance with your broker, of course, you need to offer a way for that buyer to pay you an amount that's reasonable for the work that you do. And that could be monthly payments. That could be something. There are so many ways to do this. I challenge anyone to put a comment of a scenario in which a buyer cannot pay you, and I will find a way. Trust me, I've structured every creative real estate transaction you could ever fathom. So the buyer must pay you. Okay, if this is done properly, there is never, ever going to be a scenario in which out-of-pocket costs to pay their agent remain too great and the buyer has a way to exit out of this. That should never, ever happen, because the compensation schedule that you create with the buyer should work in a way that you never come to a point when they're saying, well, your out-of-pocket costs are too great. So, and and now you're the problem, Mr. Buyer's agent or Mrs. Buyer's agent. You're the problem because you're the one standing in between me and that home that I love. And so I just need to go and work with them because the listing agent will just give me an offer and draft it for free. So you need to avoid being put in some insane position where you get blamed. You get blamed. Never mind all the work that you're doing for weeks or months at your own expense. Never mind all that. No one cares. You have to protect it with these forms, and that's what that is. All right, if you have any questions, leave a comment. Thank you for watching.